All right, folks, this is a summary of what we were talking about in class today with regards to variables, controlled variables, independent variables, and dependent variables. So your lab that you're doing is the effect of exercise on blood pressure. I'm going to pick a completely different topic here, so I'm not kind of giving away answers for your lab right up. So the idea here is the effect of fertilizer on tomato growth. So our problem statement would be, what is the effect of fertilizer on tomato growth? This is what we're going to investigate. So any investigation is going to have a control group and an experimental group. In this case, our control group, and it would always be the case, the group that gets no treatment. So in other words, no fertilizer. So our control group does not get any fertilizer. Our experimental group is the one that's going to receive the treatment. In this case, it's going to be fertilizer, because we're testing the effect of fertilizer on tomato growth. So here are our tomatoes that get fertilized. That's our experimental group. They receive the treatment, which in this case is that they're going to be fertilized. Now, let's look at independent and dependent variables. So we're testing the effect of one thing on another thing. So make this little do this little trick on your own whenever you're trying to figure out which is dependent, which one is independent. So the dependent variable has to depend on your independent variable. That should make sense, that the dependent variable has to depend on something else. And in this case, our dependent variable is the tomato size. Whether we're measuring by circumference or mass, that's not really important right now. And your independent variable is fertilizer, okay? And that should make sense. If you put it backwards, fertilizer depends on tomato growth, that makes no sense. It should be pretty obvious. Now, whenever you're doing an investigation, you have to control variables. Now, what are control variables? Those are going to be anything that could possibly affect our results. Possibly that affect, in this case, tomato growth. So we want to make sure that everything in our control group and our experimental group is the same, except for whether they're receiving fertilizer or not. So what could affect tomato growth? We have to kind of brainstorm. We're going to have the amount of water can affect tomato growth, sunlight, time, soil type composition, the location, temperature, and species of tomato. We don't want to have cherry tomatoes and heirloom tomatoes. They just, on their own, they grow to be different sizes. So those are things that have to be controlled, and we must control variables, because if we don't control variables, there can be other things affecting tomato growth other than the fertilizer. So these must be kept the same. All right, so control variables, they can affect tomato growth. They must be held constant for both the control group and the experimental group. Now, this is absolutely essential, because we need to get data that is reliable. What does reliable data mean? Reliable data is data that we can use to draw conclusions from. And we have to be confident in drawing those conclusions. Now, when we're drawing conclusions, we're trying to answer our problem statement, which is, what is the effect of fertilizer on tomato growth? Okay, hope that's helpful. Independent variables, dependent variables, controlled variables. Thanks for watching.